Welcome to our session on following the trail of dirty money and corruption linked to environmental crimes. I hope you had so far a good IACC, already got some good input on all sorts of topics. Today we want to focus on environmental crime linked to illicit financial flows and corruption. And I know in the past days, we already had some sessions talking about them, some rather focused on the policy global discussions on environmental crime. What we have felt in this IACC certainly is that environmental crime is in a crucial momentum. So what we want to do today also, and I hope that some of you also have been in the last days in some of those sessions, to kind of really get that expertise that we got, some new ideas. We know that certainly there are lots of challenges linked to those, and today we want to focus on how can we actually uncover environmental crimes from different perspectives, be it as an investigative journalist, be it from an environmental agency, from general law enforcement agencies, but also from think tanks. What can be their roles to be a part to make those people accountable for their role in environmental crime. And today also we want to take a step deeper, and that's why we will have certain cases where our esteemed panelists worked on those cases in the past years, and we want to look into them and see what can we actually learn from those cases. What were the challenges, but also maybe what were the opportunities, what were tools or approaches that were used on those cases, and how can we, in the future, to take this up. I know also that in the conference, we even launched a new working group that I know some of you are also present here. So I really think there's good energy at the moment in the room to go forward on this. And yeah, I just want to take you on that journey and take your expertise in it. So as I mentioned before, we will start with a pitch from all of our panelists on their cases, and then afterwards we will have 4 focus working groups, which each of them, just to get also your thoughts, but them to be able to explain better to you. And then at the end we will have a plenary where the results of your discussions will be presented. And then afterwards, I will also ask you what were your key takeaways from this session, but also maybe what were questions that weren't discussed during this conference. So let me welcome you again, and thank you for your active participation. And now let me hand over to our first speaker, which is Julian, who works for the Environmental Investigation Agency for the... Oh, I can do it if you want to. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Yes, who works for the Environmental Investigation Agency, which for the past almost 20 years has been conducting investigation works in all sorts of countries around the world, and also looking at illicit financial flows. And Julian will be focused on 2 cases, which he will now present. Thank you.
Thanks for the introduction. Thanks to you all for coming today. Can we put the next slide, please?
Sorry?
Next slide. So our main case I want to try and interest you in to join our group today is called State of Corruption, we called it. It's based on 10 years of investigations carried out by EIA, looking into the illicit trade in Burmese teak. So there's a Burmese teak tree. It's a very, very valuable and prized hardwood. It's only found in Burma, as the name suggests. It's used, the highest quality Burmese teak is used for super yacht decking and yacht decking. Lower grades are used for things like flooring, doors, that sort of thing. There's also plantation teak available in countries like Indonesia, Costa Rica, but that's not as widely prized and it's not as expensive. So this is a very, very precious resource, and it's one that's been mismanaged for a considerable amount of time in Myanmar. If it was managed sustainably, it would be a good resource, but it's been overlogged, leading to Myanmar to have one of the highest rates of deforestation in the world. The main, back a bit. So during the time of the democratically elected government in Myanmar, there was some progress in terms of governance of this resource. there was kind of a log export ban, and there was controls on logging. So things are moving in the right direction to make this resource sustainable. Then in 2021, the coup happened. That all came to a shuddering halt, and so the illegality has become much more rampant. The trade in Burmese teak is run solely by a state-owned enterprise called the Myanmar Timber Enterprise. It's systemically corrupt. It operates through a shadowy and opaque auction system, which is wide open to abuse. And it's exploited by a kind of small coterie of traders who have the inside track on this. So it's untransparent, and a lot of it's illegal under their own laws. So to move on, next one. So as I said, it's a very precious resource. It's managed badly, and it's infected with corruption, but the market still likes it. One of the main markets is the European Union. The European Union has some legislation called the European Union Timber Regulation, which seeks to exclude illegally logged timber from the European market. A part of this process involves companies who are importing, conducting a process of due diligence, and time again, EIA has questioned whether Burmese teak meets that criteria, and on every occasion it's been found that Myanmar teak cannot meet the due diligence requirements of the EU Timber Regulation. Ergo, there should be no Myanmar teak coming into the European Union market. But there is. And as we said, one of the major uses is for yacht decks. This is sailing yacht A, owned by a Russian oligarch called Andrei Minchalenko, who's into fertilizer and also coal. So he commissioned the ship to be built in Germany. That's the shipyard where it was built, and it has Burmese teak on it, which shouldn't happen. So a couple of years back, we put out a briefing document trying to expose the fact that this teak was getting into the EU, and it shouldn't be doing that. And we mentioned this yacht, sailing yacht A. And pretty quickly, when that briefing came out, we got severe legal threats from Melnichenko's advisors. Usual sort of response, trying to muzzle us. But just to update you on that story, when the sanctions came in place after the coup, in March 2022, this yacht was seized by the Italian authorities. So that story has a kind of like a happy ending. But despite that, there are big loopholes in the European Union timber regulation. Not loopholes, but it's not being enforced properly. Some countries are doing it, like Germany's made some seizures, the Netherlands, but places like Italy have become a big conduit for illegal Burmese teak entering the EU market. So enforcement there is quite patchy, and we need to do better on that. But it's not the only market. The US is also a major market for Burmese teak, and since the coup, the trade in Burmese teak from Myanmar to the US has grown. Now, that's despite the fact that after the coup came about, they lobbied hard to get sanctions in place in places like the EU, the US, and the UK. And these sanctions exist, and the sanctions are on the Myanmar Timber Enterprise. So you cannot trade teak without going through the Myanmar Timber Enterprise, which is now a sanctioned body. But we've seen no evidence in the US of any enforcement of these sanctions. So that's one thing I want to discuss in my group today. What can we do to make these laws that are often trumpeted and heralded make a difference in the real world? So we've also got another case if you have time, so I'll be very quick. If we get the time, we'll talk about an ivory trafficking case, wildlife crime. This case we call the Sredong connection. It's a case we spent a couple of years working on, a major investigation, when we got inside a prolific ivory trafficking syndicate that was operating in Mozambique, Tanzania, and Nigeria in Africa, and all the ivory was coming through this town called Sredong. Sredong is a town in southern China, in Guangdong province, and the people we spoke to, the smugglers, reckon that at its peak, 80% of all ivory tusks entering China illegally from Africa were passing through the hands of these syndicates based in Sredong. Next slide. And through our research and investigations, we were able to piece together how this syndicate was working, look at the different players, the different actors in the supply chain, and we were able to put values on how much money was being made at each stage of the chain. As you know, we're talking about illicit financial flows in this session, so if we get time, we'll talk you through that one as well. And to finish my pitch, I'd like to say I'm joined in the room today by 3 excellent colleagues. So if you come to my session, you get 4 for the price of 1. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julian, for this presentation. Now let me present our second speaker, Mariama Thiam, who is an independent investigative journalist who has previously worked for BBC in countries as Senegal, DRC, Congo, and Burkina Faso. And today she will also bring up two cases, one being on illicit rosewood trade between Senegal and Gambia, and the other one on IUU fishing in Senegal. Please, Mariama.
Thank you, Sophie. So, like she said, we have both two cases about rosewood trafficking and illegal fishing. But before to start, I want to introduce my colleagues because I did this job with Dimitri from Switzerland and Mustafa Darbo from Gambia, because we talk about trafficking, so we have ramification in a lot of countries. So about rosewood trafficking and about illegal fishing, I just decided to summarize because we have some similarities about these two cases, Sophie, please. So before the impact, we have some similarities about the corruption because we have corruption corruption with authorities, military authorities, but governments authorities also. Sorry for my English because I'm a French speaking. And this corruption, it is we see it on rosewood trafficking, and we see it also on illegal fishing. And the other point, it is about the lack of transparency, because we have a problem of transparency to know who is behind this kind of traffic. For example, concerning illegal fishing, we don't know in Senegal the real owner of different companies. And concerning the rosewood trafficking, we know there is some people who are, comment on dit, impliqués? Involved. Thank you. There are some people who are involved, like the former president of Gambia, Yahya Jammeh. There is also a Swiss citizen, Okay, thank you. A Swiss citizen who is involved also concerning rosewood trafficking. And the other point, it is about the difficulty in accessing of certain information, because as a journalist, normally we have les informations, les données ouvertes, les sources ouvertes. Voilà, open data. Normally we have open data, but in Senegal, even the open data, we don't have access on that. And what is a little bit funny is when you want to have the information, people are very welcoming. People are very welcoming, the authorities are very welcoming, but when you ask the main questions, you don't have an answer. So it is very difficult. And small countries have also problem sometimes to face, à faire face à de grosses entreprises. Yeah, please. Okay. To impose what they want to big companies. So that is a big problem also, because sometimes companies are richer than the country. So it is a big problem also. So now we're gonna talk about the impacts, different impacts. Concerning rosewood trafficking in West Africa, Senegal, Gambia, we have impact in the forest because the forests disappear progressively. They disappear in the south of Senegal, the region called Casamance. And the other point, it is about villages, because villages, people who live in the villages use the forest fruits to sell it and have something for their life. And the forest fruits now are decreasing, are disappearing. And the last point, it is about the health, because population use also phytotherapy, and now it's not possible because the forest it is destroyed. Thank you. So, and about the illegal fishing, IUU, because there is illegal fishing, but also unreported and unregulated fishing in Senegal. And the problem is we don't have detail also about the agreement, les accords, about agreement between the government and the different companies. And we have lack of fish, like impact. We have lack of fish in Senegal, and prices now are higher than before, and people have a problem to buy the fish. And the other problem is about the health, because people don't cannot buy fish, so they don't have les besoins, protein needs. Their protein needs, they don't have it. So it's a big problem also. I think during the case studies, we can have more details about the two cases, and I'm gonna have the help of Manuel. Sorry, Manuel. Manuel gonna help me to translate sometime when you have some remarks. If I can't understand, he can help me. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mariama. I have a really good panel who's always on time, so thank you already on that. Now our next speaker is Patrick Ali, who is the co-founder and director of Global Witness, who has also been part of up to 50 investigations worldwide, and will today focus on the palm oil industry in Papua New Guinea. Please, Patrick.
Thank you. Does that work? Yeah. Papua New Guinea is home to the third largest rainforest in the world. And we went there to investigate the activities of various palm oil companies. And we went to what's called East New Britain, which is a very large island off Papua New Guinea. And we filmed undercover various company officials and politicians to see what information they would give us. The first thing they said on film, and you can see them on our website, they told us that they'd paid bribes for permits to carry out forest clearance, about $100,000 a permit. They paid the police, who act as a kind of private army of these palm oil companies. And so, for example, if villagers were protesting, the police would go there, beat them up, and lock them in a shipping container for 24 hours, which is no joke in a tropical country like that. Or any time, really. So the investigations implicated 3 of Papua New Guinea's biggest palm oil producers, one called Rimbanan Hijau, which is a company since I began in this work, I've known about, a very big Malaysian logging company, another one called Tobar, and another one called East New Britain Forests. All of these companies were well connected. The board member of one of them was a former prime minister of Papua New Guinea. Apart from the bribery, we found brutalization of the labor force, including fatalities, amputations, poisoning through pesticides, and the extensive use of child labor. Tens of thousands of hectares of forests have been felled in what is one of the most biodiverse forests on the planet. And the palm oil ends up in brands such as Kellogg's, Nestle, Colgate, Danone, Hershey, and more. So there's a front-facing, there's a consumer-facing angle here. And another critical part of the formula we found out was the financing, that these companies are absolutely dependent on international financing. And banks across the world, including the 2 largest asset managers in the world, BlackRock and Vanguard, are financing these companies. Without that, they couldn't operate. So we exposed all that information. The one thing I forgot to say, there was also a very neat tax evasion scheme. So what they would do would be to ship the palm oil via Malaysia to India, and they offloaded some things in Malaysia, but the crude palm oil went to India, and there's a 4% tax difference between the tax that the country would charge in PNG, which is 4% higher than Malaysia. India would charge 4% extra tax for what came from PNG than Malaysia. So that works out at £110,000 per shipment of lost tax to the Indian authorities. So there's kind of a whole gamut of illegality there. So I'll stop at that point, I think.
Thank you so much. Also, Patrick. And now our last case study will be presented by my dear colleague Florence Magoma from the Kenya Wildlife Service, who has 10 years of work experience and is responsible for coordinating the wildlife crime-related cases in Kenya. Please, Florence, take the floor.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Welcome participants to this forum. Mine is just to give the experience we've had in terms of follow the money, especially in wildlife crime. We are all aware that illegal wildlife trade fuels billions of dollars every year. And it has gotten to a point where it needs us to take different approaches in terms of handling illegal wildlife trade. Criminal prosecution is not enough to probably handle these issues. So it's important for us to look at issues to do with following the money and getting the culprits or getting the proceeds of crime from these culprits. So I'll be highlighting one of the cases. No, I want to take her back to the first slide. I'll be highlighting one of the cases that Kenya Wildlife Service has taken to court through the asset recovery to recover assets of criminals who were prosecuted for the predicate offense, which is the wildlife crime, and of course now following the money through the asset recovery. When we'll go to the group work, we will see the amount of money that was taken from these people. Just briefly to highlight the case is what this involved a couple, but generally a husband and wife who were involved in illegal wildlife trade, among other offenses, among other organized crime offenses. And when you look at this case, once we go to the next slide, you can see how these people were able to layer in the money. First of all, to place the money, to layer it and integrate. So in this case, one thing we have to ask ourselves as practitioners in environmental crime is what is the importance of following the money in criminal offenses? Because then if we are only going to focus on the criminal or predicate offense, at the end of the day, we will not meet the target of stopping the illegal wildlife trade, because then we know that the persons who are involved in illegal wildlife trade are not the small persons that we deal with every day and we take to court. The networks go beyond borders, they go beyond countries. And as has been seen by my colleagues here, you can see that the networks go beyond borders as well. So then the dealers and the main people who actually handle illegal wildlife products and sell it for profit are persons who are found in other countries, and they put that money and benefit other jurisdictions as well, and benefit their families. So then another question we need to ask ourselves is what does prosecution of these people equate to automatic conviction? We will see that it is not automatic that once you prosecute someone for a crime, wildlife offense or environmental offense, then you would get an automatic conviction. And that is why it is important for you to take other avenues. And I'm hoping that even as we discuss, we will have to agree, or rather come up with the best practices on what other avenues can we take to look at dealing with the issues of illegal wildlife trade, but be it environmental crime or forestry crime as well. Just to lay a background of this matter, the accused persons were a husband and wife who then were involved in illegal wildlife trade. They were arrested sometime back in 2018. Across the years, you will see that these people were involved in other organized crime. That includes sale of drugs. And when you look at the criminal network, we will see that these persons invested this money in shell companies that they created, and proxy on the family members who are their proxies within this process. And once they layered this money, or rather put this money in the system, we will also see that they were able to put money below the required government, what do I call it? Threshold, yes. And in every country, there's always a government threshold that says that you cannot put this money. And you will see that the criminal network was clearly putting just below the minimum for every particular moment. That clearly shows you that this is a criminal network that receives some money every day and tries to evade being found out by the authorities and trying simply just to stay below the minimum and be on the safe side. But of course, that was also brought out. When you look at in terms of integration, these people had integrated the money into illegal business that seemed legitimate business. For example, they had put the money in the liquor business, where then it's not easy for you to trace the books. Then they had put money in properties, in high-end properties and in land, and they really could not explain the source of wealth. The important thing about illegal financial flows in terms of what we do now is to first of all ask the person who is claiming to own this property to explain the source of his wealth. Now, when you look at the system that we have, when you are told to explain the source of your wealth and you're not able to explain the source of wealth, then it is all those proceeds are said to be illegal proceeds, because then you cannot show the tax returns that you filed that really show where this money has come from. I mean, the money has come from in terms of the business you've done. You have not shown any books to show that you have legitimate business that is going on. So it's always important to look at those aspects. And I think lastly, then we would have to look at what were the links? What is the link to corruption in this matter? As I've explained before, these persons have been in the criminal network for about 15 years. But when you look at some of the matters that they have handled, is that they have been acquitted in all the predicate offenses. Then the question is, what would be the link with corruption then? Because that clearly means it would not be fair to say that the investigation officer did not have enough evidence to convict these persons. Again, when you look at the amount of money these people have, because as you can see from the slides, the amount that was forfeited at the end of the matter was 1 million USD. That is a lot of money if you look at all the money that was forfeited, the property. These are people who are very liquid and have the money. The question is, were they able to deal, or rather influence the processes in court for them to be acquitted in all these matters? Were they able to influence the process with the officials at the police stations and all other areas in terms where they were being dealing with? So I'm hoping that we will discuss that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Now it's up to you. So we will have, as I said at the beginning, 4 working groups. You can decide now if you want to have a deep dive on the case of Julian, Mariama, Florence, and Patrick. As you can see here, there's going to be one group here, the second group here, the third and fourth group there. As we are quite many people in the room at the moment, I would ask you to spread out quite evenly so that everyone can find a spot. So now in the next 25 minutes, as stated before, we have prepared some questions on how we can look at those cases. As I said at the beginning, what are lessons learned that we can take from those? What were approaches that were useful? But as highlighted as well, what were the challenges or things that we still need to improve in order to be it to recover the assets, but also actually prosecute those who are involved? So now we have roughly 5 minutes to find your spot, and you know who to find. Thank you. Florence, you can just say.
So is it broad or just one speaker? Or
Yes, there's going to be one speaker.
one speaker who we are here?
Florence, you want to be there?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Mariama, you want to go there? And Julian on the left?
Hey, Patrick. Jim Mintz, how are you? Haven't seen you in a while. I wanted to tell you sometime when I'm up here. I know you're busy now.
Right now, yeah. How long are you on for?
Leaving in the morning. Did you have a good conference? Quite a group.
Yeah, I have. Obviously, it's the first time for a while, and I've met lots of people that I see all the time.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's a network areas.
We sat on one of these together at one of those ICE, GIJN. So I'm a lifelong private investigator, but retiring for reinventing myself in the public needs in ways that might be interesting to you guys. No, I got it. I'll send you some. But
See, you're an investigator, you know?
I'm going to pass through London. You're still a Londoner.
Huh?
You're still a Londoner. I'm on my way.
Yeah, I'm actually based in Greece. But
How great. That's inspiring.
Yeah, about 5 questions. You can also actually come up with new questions based on what you actually come up with. I'm asking you questions, but you can also ask me questions.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Share the question with one. Three questions.
Oh, yeah.
What we learned from the story.
Yes, yes, yes.
You mentioned they were acquitted of the heroin charges,
Yes.
but were they formally charged with the wildlife charges?
They were formally charged with the wildlife charges, but also acquitted of that.
They were acquitted on that.
They were acquitted on the
Because of the evidence.
well, yeah, they said the evidence was not enough. And you can actually, when you look at the cases that they were acquitted for all the other previous matters, the heroin matters and the food heroin cases, so even in 2023, they were
Did they go to trial, or was it thrown out by the judge?
no, they went to trial.
They went to trial. Did anybody observe? Were there any monitors or anybody watching the trial?
They were monitors, yes. They were following the matter, and this is how it was proceeding, and of course the evidence was according to the investigation. And according to the evidence. No, it was just a normal call, not environmental. All of them are all, we don't have, we don't have specific courts. They're general courts. Yes, but then it's a high court. But this one we went to the lower court. They gave the magistrate court.
And the investigators, are they from Kenya Wildlife
Yes,
Service?
they were from Kenya Wildlife Service. Some of them were from the police, the national police. How much attention did you get, like, in the media? In terms of the access, it took a lot of coverage, yes. And that is why it's one of the focus cases, even in terms of recovery of proceeds of crime. So what's the diagnosis of you? The issue in the law, in the judges, where is the problem? Well, and that's why we had to discuss the problem. Really, you cannot really place a problem in this matter in a specific area, because when you look at if you don't have the benefit of looking at the evidence, yeah. But if you look at the evidence, you can see that the evidence was provided. We had to prove that this was ivory was legitimate and brought to court. But then one of the reasons was it was not sufficient. Of course, it was not beyond reasonable doubt. But then when you're talking about the offense of possession, possession is actually, we either have constructive possession or the actually, this was actually possession. It was found with them. Then what more evidence would you need to convict based on that?
Did they have an argument?
Well, of course, they had an argument. One of them was that she was not there. It was not their property. They don't even know how it got into their own car.
They all pockets.
Yeah, in their own car. So then you can imagine that kind of an argument in a court of law. And then the court said that it was not evidence to convict.
Start the discussion or can you read or say discussion?
Yes, in the prosecution. The burden of proof is not in the prosecution.
Cambodia is the elephant.
Yeah, yes, I agree.
I read from Africa last. But I don't know why is in Cambodia the custom can arrest that, but why you can from Africa or from another country how you can access that? How you can traffic that?
Well, when you look at the traffic maps, some countries in Africa actually sell ivory, but some countries don't, yeah? But then the illegal ivory is much more than the legal ivory. Because most countries in South Africa have portals where they're able to sell. Now, the challenges now, as we're talking about corruption, is that the ports of entry and exit, that public offices corruption, where then they allow people to go out to the country. And when you see containers and containers leaving, there must be a public officer who has allowed that container to leave the port. So in the port of entry, the policeman has there are scanners that actually see what is done. So we can actually attribute part of the ivory that brings to Cambodia or to Vietnam to other countries to corruption, because there's no way you can say that the public officers were not able to see that when it was leaving.
But any intervention case that they arrest them or?
Yes, we have a lot of cases still going on in court right now. Probably have been arrested, and the ivory is seized and already kept at the port. So those things are at the port. They're not left, and no matter what was going on. Yeah.
I think China, they believe like from the human that they use for the medicine or use for people can access with the wine or alcohol. They believe that it make them stronger. So that's why from wildlife animals, so it is mostly from Cambodia, from
People
Africa.
behind two individuals took their company westward, and then going to the
Government know about that.
Of course, the government is aware about it, and that's why when you look at the issue of making a product petition, you see that most of our destination countries are
going the other way on the page.
and that is
Approval for that is from the government.
China,
The government on the right and
but
the
then
on the left, and they kind of meet
really,
as the
ivory is
problem.
just a country, it's just everywhere, it's just nothing much, but it's a belief that it's a belief system, and you know, before you take away a belief system from people, it's something that you really have to understand. Again, we're trying to work with the other countries, for example, China, to see whether we can educate them and the destination countries can stop the demand. Because once you stop the demand, then yes, and when they're able to stop the demand, then there's no need to push, and there's no need to sell ivory for 57 times.
But how we intervention through financial flow, so how do you do that?
Now, through financial flows, of course, the only thing we are able to do now is the prosecution of the recovery. We take away the process from the group, because then the person who is able to do this and not poor people, these are rich people who have made a lot of money. The person who goes to feel the right is a very small matter. But once they hand it over to someone else, that is a middleman, so the very rich person then hand it over to a third party who sells it at a bigger price. So then the question is, then how are we able to get those people to other people?
I have like two quick questions. Like first of all, the proceeds, they were still in Kenya, or were there some
Most of
outside
them
of
were
Kenya?
in Kenya.
Most was in Kenya.
In this case, there was really no transnational.
Right.
They were all arrested in Kenya.
That would have been more
And
complicated.
then we have to talk about the mutual legal assistance. You know, most countries have not signed any treaties of mutual legal assistance. And they will not be able to investigate because we have cases in Singapore, for example, where we have ivory, but we've not been able to prosecute those matters because Singapore has returned the ivory. The court has to see that thing you're talking about for them to convict the matter. So, yeah.
And I was wondering, like, how, because usually the parallel investigation of these financial flows, they don't happen normally, because also it's like different cells, cities, or it's, so how did that happen in your case? Like who made that happen, or how did that, because it's very interesting.
Yeah, for our, Kenya Wildlife Service only deals with the investigation of the wildlife crime, which is the predicate offense.
Right.
Now, with partnerships or cooperation with other agencies, the asset recovery, you are able to forward the files once you have the criminal case. You're forwarding the file to the asset recovery. And because then we have that intergovernment, interagency, then we work together to investigate the other monetary offenses. And that is how we were able to investigate our offenses.
So then you investigate together?
Yes, we investigate together. And that is why even on the file, we had an investigator from the asset recovery, an investigator from the National Police Service, and an investigator from Kenya Wildlife Service, who was dealing with the evidence of the predicate offense. looking at the high cost. And then you see there's a lot of interagency cooperation. Even in terms of treating the African cost, we are dealing with the National Transport Authority, and we have to deal with the lands office as well, start to trace the access of the citizens, and also Kenya Revenue Authority. The reason how we found out that these people we're not filing tax returns. You know, once I say I am working with this company and this is my company and this is what I do, we send the company, the company to the Kenya Revenue Authority to see whether they've been
Where does the wood go?
The taxes, we're filing nil returns. How do you have 10 million in your bank account? You're telling us you don't file, I mean, your tax returns are nil. You see that it clearly shows that you are doing something illegal and you're not able to explain it.
What do you mean by
So that is
population?
how we cooperate with other
And then you went to another corporate, you say you went to what was like the lower, like other criminal finance, you went to the
now for the
Senegalese.
crime matter, we had to go to the High Court. The proceedings starts from the High Court where we have to apply to freeze the produce can you learn something from the Gambia? Then investigations continue, then they're told to explain the situation, then you don't explain the situation, then after that, we ask for cooperation. So all of it is doing that. Because they're still trying to fight to get back to the library. There is no connection, but the access to all the access so they don't have anything now. They're not the ivory, the property now. They're trying to say because you are taken, then we want the cooperation. But you see that's not possible because then you are not able to explain what are your sources. You're still not able to explain. You're still not able to explain. It is right, you've been acquitted, you are not able to explain where you got the sources. Yes. Sorry, not being able to explain is not a crime, but it's not a crime, but it's a mandatory offense.
For non-conviction based forfeiture, so you don't need to prove.
You don't need to prove a crime. You just only need to prove that this person cannot explain their sources.
Decide that is there a jury trial? It's just a judge, so the judge rules.
Can be one judge, but it doesn't have to be a
And are they specialized or?
For now, no, not yet. Because they go through several training.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're not, we don't have specialized courses
Right.
now on that particular aspect. Because we hope in the future, now that this is a new broad area, then we have specialized judges. Then we understand
the higher level of
the
presence of it
is this fairly new for Kenya, or has this preceded the non-conviction based forfeiture?
It's actually very
those that are actually transposing
new, and that is one of our
giving those
cases
money
actually in my lifetime. Because then we realize we are really having a lot of criminal cases,
so
a lot of officials. People go home with their property, they enjoy that property.
How do we have this nailed down? Should we turn back to what you want? What should we do? Is that your question?
The crime itself classes the process, and we feel it go down a bit. But another challenge is really that these people have moved on to this particular case. They have moved on to open the charge, for example. Why? Maybe anyone here can tell me why a charge is
I'm sorry, opening
a charge. They've gone to having a charge. Like now being ministers of a church. I don't know. Apostles. Yes, they're now funded. Why does anyone think we do that? It's because in our regime, churches don't file taxes. Churches do not show the source of income. There's no requirement from the worship, from the congregation. If today we have 10 million, they'll come and tell us, people here will give us. Yeah, so it's a new challenge we're facing now. Because churches are not regulated. And I don't think there's anywhere in the world where churches are regulated.
Well, actually, you know what? I'm not German, but I live in Germany, and I read recently that they have a completely different system. So they are actually the second employer in Germany is church, and they don't have the same regulations, like the salary regulation and so on, as the rest of the country. So they have also a special regime, and I don't know about taxes and so on, but probably they have also. So it's quite interesting actually, because it must be in other countries that they are.
I think in our system of churches, you can wake up today and start a church. And then wake up and say you're a member.
Is this what you're trying to do now?
But I think now these people raising some. Yes, because they're already in the government right now. You see they're a church. And there were people who were selling liquor stores and selling drugs and all that. But now
So, but you can't do anything.
you can't do anything because it's a church for now. Unless now, even if you arrest them and tell them a process of crime, what is the explanation?
Yeah.
And you know, a church is not required to have a register of members or a register of worship. Or even you tithe and your offerings is not recorded anywhere. They don't think to reach them all. There's no order, there's no audit. Then this is now going to be a new routine. And maybe as a community, we need to think about how to do that. There was a session, I think there have been 2 sessions in this conference on the issue of religion and money this morning as well. Maybe my question was, when it was no, it hasn't been appealed from the criminal side. Because we had, well, when we spoke to the prosecutor, they did not see the issue. So then the matter was not really appealed. But since we took away the process, we want to believe that we are good enough to support it. Exactly whether we work with NGOs. Yeah, so we work with NGOs as well. But not really deep into investigation because our system doesn't allow us to bring in private civil society. But on the side, they really help us a lot in terms of getting the information. One of the questions you can see there, what are the tools that we use? And some of them is Celebrate, for example. We use something called Celebrate. I don't know whether any of you have had. It's a system that is used to get data off the phones and laptops of these people so that we are able to trace other suspects. Sometimes nowadays the training is online and you can see them really exchanging sending photos to people, then you can see the money. You can see other dealers and things of other dealers. So we work with the civil society practical capacity and get equipment and then investigation.
The NGO provided self-right service.
Yes, they provide such kind of services. And expert evidence on time. So they're important as well. And again, not just private sector, this is the bank. Because even for us to get the information about the victims, we got them from the bank. So which is a really important,
But the asset recovery agency can get the information from the bank.
Yes. But without the good relationship, then they really will not give you the information.
Really?
Yes. But then we have now the financial reporting center where the bank must report any deposit over 1 million shillings or any suspicious transaction.
So, okay, so that's outside the asset recovery.
That's outside the asset recovery, totally outside the asset recovery. So then that is the intelligence operation is very, very important in terms of following the process. Because then each organization has a special niche in terms of what they do.
About how the task force for...
You make the situation very clear. Like, now are you asking us what to do, or what is our strategy?
See the tier rank or the tier color, like Cambodia has a gray color from because of human trafficking and money laundering. So the task force, they provide the tier, TIE or rank or when the country has the money laundering or so they color that country. Cambodia has
Yeah.
Yes.
So what? Yeah.
So you can
From
say
the
how about Africa?
FATF.
Yes,
Yeah, the tiers.
So how about
I really have not encountered that because, as I said, investigating into legal financial fraud and crime is still a very new concept for us. So choosing not even drunk per se, but in terms of other legal financial fraud, just right in Africa, because then it's still a bit high in other organized
so
crimes.
maybe black or gray or white?
Now it depends on what the tires mean in terms of the prevalence of the offense. But we are still low, especially but on the last meeting we had the Department on illegal financial fraud. Africa was really glad with the issue of illegal trade and not following predicate first.
Yeah.
Which is not yielding any trade because every day you're still killing elephants, you're still losing like.
Can I ask about somebody somebody
No, that all the witnesses were beneficiary.
or your public officials?
Yeah, the one that's
Were there any
no, not really, because this
could you see in the past all the past transactions?
yes, you could see the first transaction of this company, and that is how we were able to trace. But then we were not able to really have this person, because then they could have been sending their money even using cash. And one of the things I haven't mentioned was they were using one of the sisters, assistant to the accused person, to physically deliver the money. So then there were really no traces of sending the money to them. It was just between banks and the proxy agent. There was no list basically from the.
Whether
No, that was different.
How does is that case management? And secondly, did the financial judges ask that performance is worried public get something out case management, yes. How do the cases get
First
started?
of all, the cases are located by court. Basically, you have the head of state in the chief magistrate. Basically, we just allocate a matter, and there's really no consideration. Okay, of course, they have judicial law in terms of the seriousness of the offense and how maybe the money goes. So in this matter, the court in a particular station will assign a guidance in terms of where it should be. Because we don't have specialized every other day. Now, secondly, in terms of transparency, of course, the judges and magistrates usually file annual returns. They file their daily returns in terms of what they produce. So what you believe that that is the kind of transparency we have. In terms of assets, we really, unless there's an investigation that has been requested directly on the person, then you really may not be able to give in terms of production. No, we haven't. Certainly, we haven't had any. Yeah, but then I'm sure once something like that is brought up, I'm sure there'll be other court applications and all that.
Here they have a wheel with all the judges' names and roll the wheel and roll out the judge's name. So it's a big thing. So when somebody is charged and it goes to a court, it'll be announced, Thursday morning, all the cases get assigned from that week and they roll it. And you go to judge so-and-so's court, go to judge so-and-so's court. So that way you can't pick your judge. So one question was, how long was the overall investigation on the asset side, with the financial investigation?
About 2 years for the matter.
And then
For the matter to be concluded, yes.
Okay.
But investigation, probably let's say 1 year.
1 year,
Yeah.
and then another
And
year.
then the other, the hearings and all that.
And then the other one is, sort of goes back to your question, no international links at all. There were no foreign businessmen that were receiving the wildlife or anything. Wow. And what the drugs were they? The heroin?
Yes, they were selling heroin.
No information.
Again, for instance, those were matters that had been done previously.
Right.
So not much was done previously to this matter. But if they had been done, I'm sure we would have found more information. Or we took the current investigation on the wildlife demand, but not on the other.
And none of the financial links
Yes.
led to any foreign trading companies.
But they were all local companies and families where they felt safe to keep the money.
Can I ask one more about the I'm not sure if you're talking about the train. Like trace some type like the DNA,
Maybe you could write him a letter reminding him when he displays that.
Yes, we have to stop. Yeah. We're now working on that. Actually, he's done one at Tanzania, the other thing he's doing at He's also done, he has done one for a research that was done way back in 2012. He completed that, and I think he has sent back the report. And I'm hoping that maybe in the next 1 year, I'll have him, because he's come back just this year, to see how best they can address it. With all these because it's a lot of tasks. Even at the court now, we have a lot of tasks. We need to know really where it comes from. Maybe psychologists or the judiciary. Like those sections are especially because there's so many different crimes interlinked and just evidence that there was really something. And maybe awareness or understanding in the court about these issues around the wildlife, environmental crime, and just wondering whether there's been some level of training. I remember when we lobbied for advocated for the establishment of specialized standalone anti-corruption laws. And then we got the anti-corruption and economic crime division of the High Court. And that has helped, I think, yes, in terms of expediting the cases, but also in terms of having a focus in terms of capacity building. I know now we have the environmental court, but maybe I don't know whether we need to advocate that to some extent that some cases should just go directly to the environmental court and build their capacity to understand those obvious cases that lost. Maybe sometimes it's the understanding of the discussion on the bench.
Hi, everyone. I know you're having a wonderful discussion, but I would ask you to finish up and the speakers to please come in front. Yes, sir. Ganz genau. Ja. Hi, Sophie. Ich wohne in Berlin. Genau. Aber in Frankfurt auch gewohnt.
Meine Tochter vor einem Jahr.
Ah ja.
Die heißt auch Eiben.
Ah ja.
Johanna.
Ach, bei der GEZ?
Bei der GEZ, die war für die GEZ, also in Senegalese, 5 Jahre in
Ja, sehr spannend. Ja, sehr gerne. Colleagues, everyone, please come to an end. I know discussions are good.
No, but the process is interesting. We will not know the answer.
I'm trying.
Can I just go through? Thank you. Sorry, just for us to continue. Thank you. Can I ask this one? Thank you. Yeah?
It is great. But we have nothing because we discussed.
Yeah, that's all you can present.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I know you're super excited about the discussions, but I would kindly ask you to now stay focused for another 20 minutes, and then we can pick up discussion afterwards. I hope and I heard that you had a good exchange with our panelists, but now I want to give back the floor to them to present what were the main findings, questions, maybe new ideas, maybe new tools, new partnerships. So first, I would like to give the floor to Florence, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sophie. Our group had very fruitful discussions. We delved deeper into the matter and into the case that we had. And some of the important things that we came up with in terms of the discussions as some of the successes from this matter was the multi-agency approach in terms of interagency cooperation. We saw a lot of interagency cooperation in terms of following the proceeds and following the assets that were being invested by these accused persons in the various systems. So that was one of the greatest successes we discussed. Another important thing we also realized as a group was that the issue of non-conviction-based asset forfeiture. From our case, for those who have gone through it, you can see that these persons were acquitted for all the previous matters. That was the narcotics case, the 2 narcotics case, and finally the wildlife crime case, which was still done, which is the last case. So the non-conviction-based forfeiture was important because then we were able to take away all the proceeds of crime, even from the previous matters, from the previous criminal offenses, which was the heroin offenses as well. So as we follow the money, it is important for us to focus on the assets and non-conviction-based forfeiture. The interesting thing about this matter is that our criminal justice system allows us to have the 2 matters concurrently. You don't have to finish one matter to start the other. You can actually start the criminal offense and still continue on doing the civil case, which is actually a civil case at the High Court. You can freeze the assets and continue to forfeiting the assets if the owners cannot explain the sources of wealth. And that is a very important aspect when you're dealing with illegal wildlife trade. Some of the challenges we faced was, and we saw that, which I was explaining to the group, was that these persons who had been arrested and charged and assets been taken away from them started a church. And that is very clear. You know, in Africa, for example, churches are not under the radar. They are not taxed. They don't explain. They don't even give a list of their members. No one gives anything. So then it's very easy for you to get into a system like a church and hide the process of crime because they are not accountable to anyone. So that's a new frontier. Even as environmentalists, we need to look at and agree on and decide how then we can face the issue of having criminals starting churches to hide the process of crime. So that is one of the big challenges that we have. Of course, they're not regulated in terms of taxes. Another challenge was integrity of just handling the cases, maybe from the judiciary, from the police, and from all other people who are involved. The question is then, if you have the money, then there's corruption in the system. That means that people are able to corrupt the system to get away with these offenses. So it's important for us to look at what do we have to get, how then do we protect the integrity of the cases we take to court and the investigations that are done by the people we have. Lastly, international cooperation in terms of mutual legal assistance. We have realized that we have different regimes that have different laws and different regulations. In terms of mutual legal assistance, most countries do not really embrace mutual legal assistance because they feel that their person is being persecuted by another country, and they would not want to cooperate and hand over these suspects to another country because of the issue of sovereignty. The question is then, how can we be able to implement mutual legal assistance across borders to ensure that we are able to get criminals from other jurisdictions and handle them or rather prosecute them in the courts of law and ensure that all the other processes are also taken away from them. Lastly, capacity building in terms of having specialized courts for judicial officers, specialized prosecutors, and specialized investigators who then are able to understand the matters deeply and prosecute the matter to the best of their ability. Don't know whether in my group members anyone has something else I've forgotten. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Florence. Now I will next give the floor to Patrick. Please, Patrick.
I was robbed. Yeah. Can we hear me on this? Yeah. Good. I outlined a kind of different dynamic with this case because a lot of, and obviously wasn't part of the other panels, but things like the ivory trade, etc., or teak from Myanmar are illegal. It's all illegal. And what we're looking at with palm oil is a commodity that in itself is not illegal. And it's coming from a place where the government was being corrupted. So land was being cleared illegally, people pushed off their land. All of that is illegal, but quite hard to deal with because we don't have any influence on that government. And so really it all boils down to the downstream destination of that palm oil. And what we discussed was sort of going to and fro on different things. One element is this tax evasion I talked about. So that's the one thing that's an international crime affecting another country, which is something one could tackle. And then when the palm oil ends up in the goods on our supermarket shelves, whose responsibility is it to know what they're buying and to weed out what is either illegal or has resulted in human rights or environmental abuses? And we had a really good conversation about that. And I think, anyone up there shout if I'm misrepresenting you, that we agreed that the regulatory approach was the only thing that really works. You can't, it's very hard to govern. There's lots of certificates out there for different products, including palm oil, which are consistently flawed and are also confusing for the consumer. There are so many certificates out there. How does the consumer know really what's behind that? And I always sort of take the view that a consumer has the right to buy something in our supermarket that hasn't killed someone or destroyed a rainforest. And so the onus needs to be further upstream. And that comes to the two other cogs in this trade, which are the banks, who are financing the deforestation and the abuses. Obviously they don't think of it like that, but it's true. And in our experience, that would be a really important angle to tackle. Banks, we've worked on them in different ways, are very intransigent about changing the way they work. And the consumer brands, the Hershey's, the Nestle's, the Danone's, who are buying the palm oil, and Hershey has in fact cut its ties with one of these companies because of the investigation that we did, but the other ones have not. And so we talked about this new law in Europe, which came in on Monday, which is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Law, which is meant to weed out environmental and social harms in the supply chain of everything that comes into Europe. There are some loopholes, which it's unfortunate that we lobbied for. So France made sure that finance was not in the initial draft of the law, so the banks get away scot-free for a while, but that will be revisited in 2 years. But deforestation is in there, which is really good. But degradation of a forest, i.e. you haven't cut the whole forest down, but you cut lots of it down, isn't in there. So there's lots of work still to do, but ultimately laws like that in every major trading bloc would be the thing to try and weed out what we've got here. And I just want to thank everyone for having a nice chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Patrick, also for highlighting out that, especially also even looking at illegal activities, the legal supply chain is always important to look at, and this is certainly something that we should consider. Now I would please ask Mariama to summarize their discussions and maybe questions that came up. Thank you.
Okay, hello?
I think
okay. It will be simple to do it because we don't have time to check the list of questions and to discuss about it because we have I have an amazing group because we discuss a lot, but we discuss about the two cases to have some details. So people ask me many questions, and they give me their contribution. They gave me their contribution about some words we use in the article, but I'm so sorry we don't have time to check the list of questions we have to. So I think we're gonna continue our discussion after, and perhaps I can give you their retour. Le retour. Il est où, Manuel? Oh, feed paper. Perhaps after, because we don't have time for even the second case. We don't have time to really. But we talk about some important aspect, like FITI. Alors, because FITI it is an organization which help the country to have a better transparency. And which help even the civil society and journalists to have details about les contrats. Yeah, about contracts. And we talk about that. And one person in our group talked with my president in Senegal, and my president said to him, like, okay, he wants to introduce FITI. And I told him, he said that he takes this engagement since 2016. And now, Senegal n'est toujours pas membre de FITI. Yeah. And the other aspect, it is about the rebellion in the south of Senegal, MFDC, because MFDC use rose trafficking to to finance the war. Sorry, and we talk about that, and it's still continuing. Continuing. Sorry, and we talk about what else? I forget. What else? Someone want to add something, or
how the investigations also
important point also, how we do to do the investigation. And someone want to
Thank you. I think there's one thing which came up, which is perhaps of general interest. We always talk about governments turning a blind eye on corruption and therefore are being partly responsible for corruption. But I think it's important to distinguish different levels of government. So I'm the founder of FITI, of the Fisheries Transparency Initiative. And when we launched this in Mauritania, Macky Sall was sitting next to me. And he said, I want to have that also in Senegal. And I said, well, bring your fisheries minister to come up. He was sitting in the audience. He asked him to come up. And he said, I want Peter Eigen to come to Senegal, introduce Fisheries Transparency Initiative. And it never happened. We wrote several times to them. And I have similar experiences I did in Namibia, where a lot of ministers wanted to come for the fisheries sector, but the fisheries minister didn't want it. We had a similar thing in Kenya, where even Kenyatta's office, Uhuru Kenyatta's office, asked for introduction of FITI, but the fisheries minister didn't want it. So the governments are not just one monolith in many countries, but they are under different influences. So it's very interesting that you observed, for instance, that FITI would have been useful in Senegal, but you didn't get it because somebody didn't want it. Thank you.
Thank you. What is funny, it is Mauritania, who is an, comment on dit, pas dictature, mais régime autoritaire, comment on dit ça? Autocratic, okay, which is an autocratic system. Mauritania is a member of FITI. And sometimes we got information about Senegal via the reports of Mauritania. It is very funny, but yeah. And the last thing, just excuse me, I want just to comment dire, préciser, to precise. Okay, to precise that the first case about Rosewood, we did it also grâce au. Thanks to CIFAR. And the second report about illegal fishing, it is thanks to International Financial Coalition. Yeah, it is important to say it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariama. Now, last but not least, Julian, please. Also, your summary of your
Okay, I'll be
report.
brief. Thanks very much to my group. We had a great conversation, discussion. We were posed with 4 questions. Question 1 was, what are the main barriers to conducting financial investigations into environmental crimes? From a CSO perspective, there are many barriers when you're trying to investigate finance. Obviously, there's strict legality and secrecy rules that can be very awkward. But when we look at governments, it can be the fact there might be poor legislation and also poor access to information. Also, there's a lack of priority amongst some of the agencies to look at finance of these crimes. It's still not high enough profile. We've got many sessions in this meeting here, but in the outside world, environmental crime is still not viewed as serious as we'd like it to be. So there are methods used in other crimes, like parallel financial investigations. When you seize something like ivory, the best thing to do is to bring the financial intelligence people into this discussion early on, but that's hardly ever done. So we're missing lots of tricks. And that means that often a seizure of wildlife will just end up as a commodity seizure, and we're not going to track the money that's really behind that. And we might just get the guy who picks it up on his truck, and he's the guy who goes to prison, and we're not really getting into the money there. So it's really important that we do parallel financial investigations into these crimes and don't just leave it to the sort of customs or the police. We need the financial experts in the room to do that. So basically, the question 2 was, what are the role of shipping companies in both cases? In the 2 cases I spoke about, the role of shipping companies was absolutely crucial and central. Of course, you can't move large amounts of teak wood by hand or by air. It all goes by ship. And in the case of the ivory trafficking syndicate, there again, it was moved by container. So they play a crucial role. The problem is often that the risk profiling is not good enough to understand these routes, because if you look at these crimes in detail, you will see there's always a pattern. And obviously some ports feature more than others in these crimes. Some ports are used more because criminals are always looking for the weakest link and the weakest port. So for example, in Kenya, for example, lots of seizures have taken place in Mombasa, so Mombasa is still quite a key port. What else on that one? Yeah, and the third question was, what techniques can be used by civil society and journalists? Oh yes, the one on the shipping is to engage the private sector as well, sorry. The private sector, of course, is crucial because the private shipping lines are shipping lines. There is the organisation in the UK called United for Wildlife. It was set up a few years ago to try and bring in private sector to look at wildlife crime. And there's a transport task force, which brings in some of the biggest shipping companies in the world. So they have access to lots of information, these shipping companies, so they can make sure the risk profiling is a lot better when it comes to trying to detect these illicit flows of wildlife. The third question was, what techniques can be used by civil society and journalists to track money flows linked to environmental crime? I said before, it's quite difficult for journalists to track financial flows, but what we can do, and what we've done quite a lot of at EIA, is to show what companies are involved in these crimes, to do typologies, case studies to show where the goods were moving and some of the companies involved, and then get the authorities and the banks to do this work, because CSOs must realize they can't do all this work themselves. So we have a program at EIA where we gather open source data on court cases and of people involved in environmental crime, and we send that along to a range of banks on a regular basis. That helps them do their know your customer checks, so they can make sure if people who are in the banking system are using it to launder proceeds from wildlife crime, you can get those people out of the banking system if you know that. So the role there for CSOs is to increase the profile of environmental crime and try and make it sure it's a priority for banks to look at this. And it's slowly changing, but it's not there enough at all yet. And one thing was mentioned by a colleague as well is trying to get the judiciary and other agencies to understand how important these crimes are. My colleague said that they were talking to a prosecutor in a country about illegal logging. And the person said, why are we talking about trees? Why is that important? So I said before, we're on the right path here with environmental crime. We've got a long way to go to get it right up the agenda to make it treated the proper way. And the last question was environmental crimes across border. What barriers are there to, how is the sort of international cooperation going? We found that generally there are quite a few barriers still to international cooperation because of formal systems. Often countries will go through things like mutual legal assistance. This can be quite a very bureaucratic process. It can take a long time. You might have to go via embassies. But we also discussed the fact that, you know, if someone's in country A, where the ivory came from, it's been seized in country B, then sometimes you can make an informal connection with that country and have a conversation to help your investigation. It might have to go formal to go to court, but you can take other channels rather than go through the formal mechanisms, which are very bureaucratic and can take years sometimes. And I think I'll leave it at that, but there's a bit more there to say, but I'll leave it, and thanks to my group for some great discussions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this group work, for sharing your ideas, your thoughts, going to discussions. So the questions also were rather meant as a guidance. But I think the important about this session is really to connect all of us together, because I think, as was highlighted here before, we all have a role to play on combating environmental crime, be it from the financial side, but also especially civil society putting pressure, because as was highlighted here, we do have a momentum, and especially in the past 3 years, when a Financial Action Task Force decided to put it as their priority, published reports about it, but they did their internal conduction and how it proceeded, and they saw there was some increasement within countries, but not enough, for sure. And I know that especially civil society has been done a great work to make governments actually focus on this issue and put it as a priority. But as has been highlighted here before, be it law enforcement, financial intelligence units, but also even sometimes banks and the private sector are not looking enough at that. Although oftentimes they have the data, they have the measures to do that regarding other crimes. So as Florence was highlighting, we have a lot of crime convergence with environmental crime. So it's really about broadening it and actually building alliances for us all to be able to bring environmental crime to an end. So let me again thank you all for your active participation. It was a pleasure to work with all of you, and also a special thanks to all of my speakers for being here today. Thank you so much.